Welcome to Gift of Life, the Organ Transplant Podcast. These are the stories of those who have received, given, and who are waiting for the gift of life, organ transplantation. Now here's your host and heart and kidney recipient, BJ Odom.
Welcome to the Gift of Life, the Organ Transplant Podcast, where we explore the extraordinary world of organ transplantation. I'm your host, BJ Odom. Each week we share inspiring stories and introduce you to remarkable individuals sharing their own transplant stories. Be sure to support the podcast by leaving a 5-star review and subscribing on your preferred podcast platform. Have a transplant story to share or comments about the podcast? We would love to hear from you at giftoflifepodcast@gmail.com. Again, that's giftoflifepodcast@gmail.com. And don't forget to connect and follow us on Facebook, Gift of Life, the Organ Transplant Podcast. And check out the new website, giftoflifepodcast.com. Welcome to episode 61. Today, we talk with Stephanie King, a strong, loving mother of Emily, who is only 8 years old. Her life has been filled with many difficult times, plus has been through not one, but 2 lung transplants, one at just 2 years old, and after rejection, a second at age 7. We pray and wish Emily and her family the very best, as we'll talk to her mother, Stephanie, coming up next. Stephanie, we are so looking forward to Emily's story. Before we get started, though, why don't you tell us just a little bit about yourself?
My family and I, we live in Maine. I'm a first grade teacher. We just got out for the summer. We love reading and we're skiers and like spending time with family.
Awesome. Well, you know, it's funny that you're a teacher. My daughter's a teacher, but she graduated a grade. She's at 2nd grade.
Oh, I started with 2nd and then they put me back in 1st. So I didn't do something. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, actually, I'm glad you're with us this morning because we are going to talk about your daughter, Emily, and her story. She's a lung transplant recipient and very happy about that. So when did everything begin? And just start from the beginning, if you would, where her story is.
Her story begins 8 years ago when I was pregnant with her. I had a few different complications and ended up being on hospital bed rest for 10 weeks. And then during that time, I had premature rupture of membranes, so her lungs couldn't develop properly. And after 10 weeks, she was delivered through emergency C-section at 32 weeks. She was kind of a big baby for the NICU at the time, but she was definitely one of the sicker babies. She required all of the support that they had available to her, maxed out on all of the settings. And slowly but surely, she improved over the course of 8 weeks in the NICU. Around the 8-week mark, we got to bring her home. She still required home oxygen and so many specialist appointments and PT, OT, speech therapy, all the things. She had a diagnosis of cerebral palsy at the time from low oxygen at birth. And she required some braces for her feet. And she also had a flat head, so she had a couple of helmets to reshape her head. But overall, she was getting healthier every day. And around the time she turned 2 years old, she was only on oxygen at night. And then in February of 2019, at 2 years and a few months, she came off oxygen completely. And we were so excited. We thought, you know, bye to oxygen, hello, healthy toddler, ready to tackle the world healthily. But a month later, in March of 2019, she got what we thought was just a cold. But pretty quickly, she deteriorated. She was back on oxygen, using her nebulizers and inhalers again. And she was admitted to our local children's hospital in Maine. And probably a day or two into that hospital stay, she just declined very rapidly, ended up in their PICU and went through all of the the interventions that they had available to them at the time. And she was, again, max settings, declining. There was nothing more they could do. So they needed to weigh the options of, do we transfer her to Boston Children's now, or will she be able to survive by putting her on a different type of vent? The problem being that if they put her on the new type of vent, the oscillating vent, she would not be able to travel. So if they chose to keep her in Maine, she would stay in Maine, and there was nothing more they could do for her after the oscillator. Her doctor at the time, Dr. Ferguson, decided to preemptively transfer her to Boston Children's with the idea that she could potentially require ECMO, which is extracorporeal membrane oxygenation. So they take her blood out through veins and arteries, and they oxygenate it and put it back in. So when we got to Boston, they were like, oh, no, she doesn't need ECMO. That's for platinum sick kids. And we were like, okay, good. But after a week in Boston, she continued to deteriorate. And so they made the choice to put her on ECMO to give her lungs some time to recuperate. But it became clear after a couple weeks on ECMO that they just were not going to recover. So at the time, she was not a candidate for lung transplant because of the type of ECMO that she was on. And due to her size, her cardiothoracic surgeon had to use equipment in a different way to make her eligible for a lung transplant. So even before she was listed, she was, making medical history, and they were doing everything possible to keep her alive. So even after we made her a candidate and she was listed, we were told, you can hope for the best, but honestly expect the worst. Given her size and just how sick she was, they did not anticipate her getting lungs in time. She was a very sick little girl, and lung transplants take weeks to months to even years to get. So she, had weeks maybe to live. So we were, hoping for the best, but honestly still, thinking and preparing for everything that comes if we were not to get lungs. After only 36 hours on the list, though, she received the call, the gift of life. There were lungs available to her. Her lung donor, Hannah, was 22 months old, and her parents chose to donate life in, some of their darkest days. They gave that gift to our family, a gift of watching Emily grow and turn into a kid and get to experience so many things that she hadn't gotten to yet, so many things that Hannah didn't get to as well. So we are eternally grateful for Hannah and her parents. We've met them a few times, and we have a great relationship with them. And they're just great people, and they've given the gift of our daughter back to us. So after that, Emily thrived. She did all the things that a typical toddler and young child would do. She learned to talk. She did physical therapy, and all of the signs of her cerebral palsy had kind of diminished. She has a very minor case. So if you looked at her, you would think typical child. And, she did all of her Boston appointments that she has to do, and takes all of her anti-rejection meds, and does all of the things to keep her lungs healthy. But in October of 2023, her and her daddy went down to Boston for a routine quarterly lung transplant clinic. And I actually didn't go with them because it was supposed to be just a routine appointment. And I got a call while I was teaching that Emily's lung function had drastically declined in 3 months. She went from being 90% functioning all the way down, I think, until the 50s, 50% lung function in 3 months. So that's a very rapid decline. So it was very serious. She was immediately admitted for testing and to start high-dose steroids to try to see if they could stop the course of rejection of her transplanted lungs. But unfortunately, her decline just continued rapidly. So by the time she was discharged out of that admission a couple weeks later, she was down to 30% lung function. Eventually, she settled in the 22% lung function range, and we started photopheresis, which is we went to Boston every week, 2 times a week. And essentially, they take her blood out, put in a UV reactive medication, put it through a machine that activates the medication, and it helps her body stop rejecting her lungs. And again, that was just a bridge to a second transplant. So after another evaluation in December of 2024, she was listed again. And we just continued doing photopheresis for the next 7 months, and hoping that another brave family would make a choice in their hardest time again and give us the gift of seeing our daughter grow even more. And on July 17th, we got the call that there were lungs for Emily again, and we did the whole process over. Her recovery this time was a little bit bumpier. She went into this transplant healthier, as she wasn't on ECMO, but second transplants generally are harder. There's more scar tissue, more bleeding associated, just more risk in general. But her surgery, she went through it with flying colors. It was shorter than they anticipated, no complications. So her lungs were a beautiful match for her. So we anticipated a harder recovery, but not as hard as we had been told it would be. Unfortunately, a week after transplant, she was extubated and doing okay, but there were signs that she was still struggling to breathe. And so it turns out she had caught a couple of viruses either before we went for transplant or during her stay. Didn't really matter at that point, but she had COVID-19 in her brand new lungs, and she had adenovirus. Both are very dangerous, obviously, in a freshly transplanted person. And so she struggled a little bit, but eventually she started turning the corner. And after, I want to say, about 6 weeks, she got to come home, and she's had a couple of inpatient stays since, but overall she's doing really well. That year of rejection was very difficult. Watching her, she lost so much weight. She was so emaciated. She lost out on living the life that she loved. She couldn't dance anymore. She had to quit soccer. She couldn't go to school. She couldn't see her friends. She was basically just home all the time, and she couldn't even breathe to go trick-or-treating. She couldn't keep up with her little cousin anymore. So she was, it was like seeing our 7-year-old at the time lose pieces of herself. And being 7 now, she had a better understanding about what to expect and how her body felt different. And it was a longer process. So it was definitely hard emotionally watching her lose the life that she loved.
I was sickly as a child, so I was living my normal life. And that's what I've, told another mother who is waiting for a lung transplant for her child. I go, because, he's on the machinery, but, he's exercising and, walking around and getting around.
Yeah.
He just has to be at the hospital. But I said, because, a parent worries about that and is going through it as a young child. I says, yes, but to him, that's his normal. So, he's accepting it because to him, it's normal. But now what you say is that she has, once she gets out of the normal bubble, her normal bubble, she's in a positive, great feeling bubble again. And so, yeah, I would say that would be quite a, because once you felt good and then not feeling, good again, has to be a real setback emotionally.
It was very hard for her this time. She struggled with that a lot. She struggled with, her spirituality, and she struggled with what happens after death, and just having your 7-year-old ask you questions about when she dies is just very, very heartbreaking. And so it became when I die, Mom, instead of if, and that's just a really difficult thing for you as a parent to know that your child knows about. When they're 7, that shouldn't even be a care in their world. But it was a very real possibility that she wouldn't get lungs in time. And it was a very real possibility that she would die. And she knew it. We were very honest with her in age appropriate terms. So it was a very difficult year watching that and trying to support her. And even at 7, she would try to protect the people around her's feelings. Like, she wouldn't talk about death in front of her grandfather because she didn't want him to get emotional. And she would save her questions for her therapist and things like that to try to protect the people around her.
Wow.
So that's it's heartbreaking that she felt like she had to do that. So, but now that she has her second set of transplanted lungs, she's gained a ton of weight back and she has energy for days. She's back in school. She's thriving. She's learning to read again. She's just learned how to ride her bike without training wheels, and she's learning how to swim. And she's talking about, she has all these choices opened up to her life again now that she didn't have a year ago. She's, do I want to do soccer or do I want to try something new and do cheer? And maybe I'll do cheer, dance, and soccer, Mom. And just seeing her excited for the future instead of scared is just the best gift that you could have as a parent.
And
so that's her story.
It's like, as myself being, sick as a child and hearing a lot of these children's stories that are waiting for transplants, because I didn't get mine till later in life, and I had heart defects, and I had my first open heart surgery at 22 months old. And my parents were even told that I would never live past my teens. And I didn't know that, of course, but they did that. And that's just got to me in the back of my mind because I didn't know that, but I'm a parent. My children are grown now, but I can only imagine what that's like. And I would think it's got to be the worst thing to go through in the entire world. And you went through it twice.
Yeah, I mean, even, obviously, transplant's not a cure. It's trading one thing for another. It's trading immediately terminal disease for a chance at more years, more healthy years. And lung transplants are very, very fragile and very hard to keep. Every breath you take, you're taking in dust particles and all kinds of things that can irritate your transplanted lungs and lead to inflammation and possibly rejection. So transplanted lungs, she had her first transplanted lungs for about 5 years, and there's an outdated statistic now. It's a little better than it was, but at the time of her first transplant, they said that only 50% of transplants are functioning at the 5-year mark. So, we've lost so many friends. We've seen friends that didn't even get 5 years after transplant lose their babies really quickly. So we're very aware that even her second transplant doesn't guarantee a year. It doesn't guarantee 5. It doesn't guarantee anything. Things happen all the time with transplant kids. And so we live each day to the fullest, trying to, make her happy and live her life in the way that she wants to live it. But it is heartbreaking when she says things like, when I get married and I want to have babies and, when I get older, I want to be a doctor. And, your first thought is, I really hope you get to do those things. But the reality is that there's a really good chance she won't. But it doesn't stop us from hoping. It doesn't stop us from being grateful for both of her transplants and both of her donors every single day. But it is very hard.
Well, one thing I can tell you, and I just actually saw this today because I'm on some of the transplant sites and try to grab this and hold on to it as much as you can. I saw, because I was saying, with my heart, I'm 22 years out now. And I had expressed that. And someone made a comment on the post that they were 31 years out with a heart and lung transplant.
Mm-hmm.
And that just
Yeah.
totally blew my mind. And, obviously,
We definitely have friends. Yeah, we definitely have friends who, their son is about 13 or 14 years out post-transplant. So there definitely is hope, and we always cling to that. There are transplant recipients that have lived 30 years with their transplant. And so we definitely hope for the best and, just live life and with no regrets and do all the things now and don't wait till tomorrow because it's not guaranteed. It's not guaranteed for anyone.
That's true.
But living the transplant life, it's even more, we're more aware of it. So.
Now, what would you say to parents out there? Because like you said, it was a tragedy and the worst day of their lives when they, lost their child. And of course they were loving enough to donate lungs where, your daughter can live more years and, more opportunities with mom and dad. What would you tell parents of a young child that unfortunately passes away about organ donation?
This is, I can talk about Emily's story all day long, but I would say that this is the hardest part to talk about because there are no words that you can say that truly thank donors and their family. There's literally nothing I can say that would help ease their pain. There's no words big enough to thank them for sure. But I would say that their gift in their hardest times makes a world of difference for someone else. Their child is, no longer with them, but they've given us the greatest gift that anyone could ever receive. Emily's made memories with her brothers. She's, gotten a Make-A-Wish trip. She's turned into a little human that we never even knew. A 2-year-old is obviously a little person, but her personality wasn't even fully developed at that point. And so they've given us a gift that is bigger than anything, bigger than words, bigger than anything that we could even describe. And I know that we are incredibly thankful for Hannah and her parents and our second donor who we have yet to connect with. We are thankful every single day. Not a day goes by that we don't think of Hannah. We talk about her as if we knew her. We have her picture in our house. We live each day trying to do random acts of kindness in Hannah's name just because we are so grateful that they made that choice and that, I just can't even imagine, like, even having a sick child and having contemplated her death many times throughout her life. I just can't even imagine the loss that they feel and the bravery that they felt. The bravery that they had to have to make that choice, that selfless decision to give pieces of their world away in order to make someone else whole again, to be able to live life more.
Now you said, you met Hannah's parents, her first donor. Have they followed Emily's journey along the way into a second, transplant? And I mean, because I've talked to a lot of people that have actually met like the donor family and the ones that have met, because there's many that haven't. And, there's, HIPAA laws and everything else that prevents it. But they are like a tight-knit family. Are you like that with Hannah's parents?
They live about 6 states away from us, but we love them. We've met their children that they've had since Hannah. We've seen them in person twice. We've planted trees in Hannah's memory. We have a Facebook page in Hannah's memory where we've encouraged people to do random acts of kindness. We've talked during important milestones. They've sent Emily birthday gifts. And as soon as Emily started rejecting Hannah's lungs, they were the first to know, just out of respect. And we just really wanted to make sure that we protected their feelings as much as possible even as we were going through something very difficult, because we care so much about them, that, we let them know first, before it was public knowledge. And, because we do care about them so deeply. So, we don't see them as often as we would, love, being so far away, but, they do feel more like family, than not. And, her family does follow her Facebook page, on, Empower, and they've, followed Emily's journey into second transplant, and, watched everything. And we, as having felt as connected to Hannah and her lungs and her family as we did, it felt almost like a loss when Emily rejected. And that was a whole new level of emotion that we didn't anticipate, feeling. So, that was hard, but, it's just because we do love her family so much. But even though Emily no longer has, the honor of taking care of Hannah's lungs, we still think of Hannah every single day. And because without Hannah, there would be no Emily. Emily would not have made it to transplant without Hannah.
This is what I always like to tell parents, because, I've talked to a few now. It used to start at, this podcast started with, donors and donor families and mostly older, adults, that got transplants.
Mm-hmm.
But it seems like lately I've been getting a lot of, the younger children and their parents, that are going through this. And so what I always try to tell each and every one of them, like I said earlier in the podcast, my parents were told I would never make it to 14. And then, of course, a new experimental surgery came along. And then that kind of went away. And so then transplants came along, and I got a heart transplant. So that's one thing I always want people to focus on. Never give up, because each and every day there are new cures, there are new ways to do things. And that's all I can tell a parent, when I hear these stories, because they just break my heart. But, I know my parents were strong, and, they raised me to be as normal as I could. And, thank God there was medical advances along the way. And I hate to say it out loud, but I'm a 70-year-old old man that you're talking to right now, whose parents were told that I'd never live past 14.
Yeah, we hope for that every day. Medical science obviously is improving every day, and Emily wasn't even a candidate for lung transplant. So every barrier we've taken on, fully ready, and we fight till we can't anymore. And then, that's just where we're at in life. And we just are so appreciative of what time we do have with her. And we really hope that, science does catch up to what she might need in the future. And whether that's a third transplant, or I don't know, maybe eventually they'll make hearts that don't need a donor, or that are fully robotic. I said hearts. I meant lungs. Maybe they'll have robotic lungs.
They're doing that with kidneys. It's, still experimental, but by the end of this decade, you may find that dialysis will be a thing of the past, and they'll be getting these, electronic kidneys. Well, I wish you the very best. Anything that maybe I missed asking you, or something, you would like to discuss before we let you go? And thank you so much, because Emily has an amazing story, and I'm so glad that you were brave enough to share it today.
No, just thank you for being out there and being a voice for the transplant community. There's just not enough focus on it in any organ. And I think that sharing her story will help others. Lung transplants in pediatrics are very rare. Last year there were only, I think 26 nationwide or something crazy. So it can feel very isolating when you're waiting for lungs, or even after transplant. So I think that we hope that by sharing her story, other people can feel not as alone. And I know the kiddo that you had mentioned before, who's waiting for his transplant in the hospital, we are very aware of them, and we've talked to his family too. So that's why we share her story. We just, hopefully that someone waiting can hear Emily's story and know that there's hope and there's good days to come for them too.
Thank you so very much, Stephanie, for sharing Emily's story with us today on the podcast. And be sure to join us each week for a new heartfelt episode of Gift of Life, the Organ Transplant Podcast. And if you have a transplant story, please email us, giftoflifepodcast@gmail.com. Follow us on Facebook and don't forget to like and share this episode with family and friends. We also appreciate that 5-star review on your favorite podcast platform. Another podcast you might enjoy is myself and my former radio partner, Bill Stevens. BJ and Bill, the podcast, all on the Podcast Playground Network. We want to thank them for making this podcast possible. Until next time, I'm BJ Odom. Thank you so much for being a part of our journey and reminding us all to appreciate each and every day and to treasure the extraordinary gift of life.
He was running on empty, heart fading fast. Doctor said, man, you ain't gonna last. But a stranger's kindness, a gift so true, turned the night sky into something new. He got a second chance, he got a brand new spark. Like a freight train rolling back from the dark. Gift of life, let the story be told. One heart beats, another takes hold. Give a little, save a soul. Ain't no greater rock and roll. "15 years later, the road got rough. The fight ain't over when the climb is tough. Needed a kidney, the race was on. Another hero stepped up, kept him strong. Every breath he takes is a tale of hope. One life saved, another can cope. Gift of life, let the story be told. One heart beats, another takes hold. Give a little, save a soul. Ain't no greater rock and roll. Doctor's hands, a donor's grace, running on down to a brand new place. Second chances don't come twice, but when they do, man, they feel so nice. So let's spread the word, let the people know. One yesterday lets a miracle grow. You don't need wings just to save a man, just a little love, a helping hand. Gift of life, let the story be told. One heart beats, another takes hold. Give a little, save a soul. Ain't no greater rock and roll. BJ still rockin', still standing tall, thanks to the ones who gave it all. Gift of life, hear the sound. Pass it on, pass it down. The Gift of Life podcast, hosted by BJ Odom. Listen now. Listen now.